right, guys, let's cover chapter 4 and 5. Now, remember, I might be going through this a little bit quickly, so if you have any questions or confusion or concerns, call me, email me. If you're able to, stop by my office hours and come see me. I'll be happy to talk to you or discuss anything that you're feeling a little bit lost about. Chapter 4 is all about listening, and we did just cover the ethics of listening. So now we want to take that one step further. In my introduction here, you can see the poor little guy laying on the floor obviously wasn't listening, as his boss is looking over him saying, "You were not listening. I said, do not fall." And while that's can be humorous, and we know that oftentimes people don't listen or pay attention the way we'd like them to, the bottom line is that as human beings, we actually spend more time listening than any other activity. So if we look at how long or how often we speak, we listen, we read, we write, out of those 4 things, listening is the thing that we do most often, most frequently. Unfortunately, however, we're not actually taught how to listen. We are expected to just have this as a natural skill, but it really is a skill that we need to work on and that we need to develop. We remember only 50% of what we hear the day after we hear it. And 2 days later, we remember only 25%. So listening, hearing, remembering, there's not really a great correlation there. Okay, but again, this is probably some good statistics to remember, knowing that you have a test coming up. We remember 50% of what we hear the day after we hear it, and then 2 days after we heard it, we only remember 25%. What is listening versus hearing? Again, refer to my comic. Is my opinion that some of you do not listen very well. And the students are saying, huh, what did he say? Phrases that I've heard more times than I care to admit. Listening is actually intermittent, meaning it is not constant. When we are listening, it happens from time to time and in chunks. Listening is something that we actually have to learn to do because it requires some focus, it requires paying attention. Listening is active. We have to concentrate, we actually have to interpret what it is that we are listening to, and we actually have to have some kind of a response to it. Listening implies that we're going to use the message that we have received. It implies that we have a choice. So we're either going to participate in the process or we're not going to participate in the process. In terms of the process of listening, we have to, first of all, receive the message. Okay, that's the first of 6 steps, meaning we actually hear it. So listening is active, but hearing is passive. Okay, we hear lots of stuff. It doesn't mean we're actually listening to it. So the first step in the actual listening process is we have to hear and receive the message. But listening actually goes beyond hearing. So the second step in the process of listening is select, meaning we're going to decide what it is we pay attention to. Think of the example of witnesses to a crime where they don't necessarily remember everything. They zone in on, they focus in on specific things. The third process, or the third step in the process of listening, is interpreting. And different people are going to interpret things different ways. So as communicators, we need to be sure that we're very clear and specific in what we share. Otherwise, if we're talking to 15 people, when those 15 people leave the room after hearing our presentation, they might have 15 different ways that they heard it, or 15 different interpretations of what it was that you actually meant. The next step is understanding. When we understand something, it means we consider not only what it was that was said, but the context in which it was said. Okay? And we take that information and we sort of merge that with our prior knowledge, things that we already know. The way we understand is by hearing things and connecting that to information we already have available to us. The next step in actual listening is evaluating. That's where we decide for ourselves whether we agree or disagree with what we've just heard. We can judge things like quality, we can judge consistency, we can judge truth. And then finally, resolve. Resolve is when we decide what we're going to do with the information. So you've now been given this information, you've heard it, you've listened to it, you've actually processed it, you've considered it, you've evaluated it. Now what are you going to do with it? Okay, so receive, select, interpret, understand, evaluate, resolve. 6 steps in the process of listening. What are the obstacles we have to overcome in order to be effective listeners? The first obstacle that I'm going to talk about is physical distractions. So these are things that happen through your senses. What are you seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting? Those become physical distractions. An example of a physical distraction would be if there's a weird smell in the room, or if it is if there's like drilling going on next door, like the hearing is getting in the way, okay, hearing these distracting noises. Or physiological distractions. Physiological distractions are things that are actually happening with your body, meaning it's too hot in the room, it's too cold in the room, maybe your arm hurts, maybe you have a headache. Those are physiological distractions. Psychological distractions. These are those things that get in the way of us being able to effectively listen because we have already a specific point of view, which may not be the same as the point of view of the person who we are supposed to be listening to. So when we have an opposite opinion or a different opinion than the speaker, it does make it more difficult for us to listen and truly be open-minded about what they are saying. The next obstacle is factual distractions. This is where a speaker is giving you information, but they're giving you so much information at once and they're listing so many facts that it is too much information to process. So rather than our brains ordering it, we just shut down and we only hear bits and pieces, we only hear fractions. And then finally, semantic distractions. This is when the speaker is using large words that we don't know the meaning of, or maybe they're using words and pronouncing them incorrectly. And these are the type of things that are going to be distracting to us. If they're talking about something we don't understand, we're going to focus on that and we're not going to hear the next 2 or 3 things that they say. So that would be a semantic distraction. In order to promote better listening, because ultimately listening leads to learning, we need to have a desire to learn. So that's something that is really internal to each one of us. Good listeners begin with the assumption that every speech can potentially benefit them in some way. Speakers can promote better listening by demonstrating early in the speech exactly how your information is going to benefit the listener, okay? And this is why the introduction to your speech is going to be so important. Ultimately, your introduction is going to have 4 components. It's going to have an attention getter, which grabs them in, hooks them in, like if you were writing an essay. Then it's going to have a credibility statement. You're going to say something about yourself, about your knowledge, about your experience that makes you qualified to talk about the subject you have chosen. So for relevant person, you've chosen this person, and the thing that makes you credible is that this person is a nurse and you are studying to be a nurse, and you've done research about this person who invented the ultrasound and you're hoping to work in the neonatal unit, okay? That'll be the second component. The third component is the audience benefit. So I don't want to be a nurse and I don't see myself working with children, so how is your information going to benefit me? So what you may want to talk about is that at some point I may have to go and get an ultrasound, or maybe I'll have a daughter who will get pregnant and go have an ultrasound. Ultrasounds are also used for things other than pregnancy. So again, talking about that and making it relevant to the audience is going to make you connect with the audience about a topic that maybe they never even thought was relevant to them. And then finally, the fourth component you're going to use is your thesis statement. Your thesis statement is going to outline what you're talking about and the major pieces of evidence that you're going to explain and elaborate on. Okay, the next thing you can do to promote better listening is to focus on the message. Again, not the way it's being delivered, not necessarily nervous tendencies of the speaker, but really try to overcome those things and focus on what is being said rather than how it's being said. Okay, listen for main ideas. Speakers need to help the listeners by organizing the information, and we're going to talk about organization, we're going to talk about signposts, we're going to talk about using transitions and how these things will help the listener. But as a listener, we pay attention for those things. Understanding the speaker's point of view. Different experiences shape and limit our understanding of messages. So again, it's about not worrying what are my thoughts, what are my feelings, what are my beliefs, but what are the author's feelings, the author's thoughts, and why do they believe that way? What evidence are they offering? And then trying to be open to that. Reinforce the message. Okay, mentally repeating or putting what the author is saying in your own words will help you remember what they're saying and be able to give feedback and ask better questions. You can provide feedback. Good listeners actually give verbal and nonverbal feedback. So if someone is up there speaking, you can nod your head, you can clap, you can acknowledge, you can also look confused or look worried or look surprised or laugh at a joke. These are all ways that you can provide feedback. Okay, listen with your body. That means that you are going to be sitting up straight and you're going to be facing the speaker. It does not mean that you're going to cross your arms and lay your head on your desk. Okay, so again, listen with your body posture in the same way that you're listening with your actual ears. Withhold judgment. Again, this goes back to the open-mindedness that we've been talking about. Is the speech accurate? Are the sources credible? And has the speaker actually omitted good information or important information? Critiquing speeches. You've already had a chance to do this last week when you were giving both positive and constructive feedback to each of your fellow classmates. But things to keep in mind. Criticism is valuable, okay? Repetition of a criticism reinforces it. So if everyone in the room says you're looking at the ceiling, or everyone in the room says you're using the word you probably are, and you need to be working on that. If only one person, however, said, when you slammed the desk, it scared me and I didn't like it. Only one person said that, meaning other people in the room either weren't bothered by it or actually felt that it was effective. So before you take your criticism to heart and get overly offended, make sure that it's something that lots of people are feeling and not just the feeling of one person. Okay? Different people are going to appreciate different aspects of a speech, which is why I want each of you to really be very specific in the feedback that you give, even to the point where you're quoting the speaker back to themselves. So when you said this, it was effective. When you said this, it made me laugh, or this made me cry, or this made me confused. 10 suggestions for evaluating speeches. Number 1, always start with what they did well. Then target 1 or 2 areas that they can focus on. Again, for you guys, if you can pick out just one area for each speech you watch, that will be perfect. Okay? Organize your comments. So again, I'm giving you rubrics that are going to help you do this. Be specific. Don't say good eye contact. Say, I like how you scanned the room. I like how you how your voice went up when you said. I like how you whispered when you said. Okay, so be very specific. Be honest. Don't lie. Don't tell them something that's not true, but do it in a way that is respectful and is going to allow them to maintain their own self-esteem. Right? Personalize your comments. Instead of saying when you did this, when you did that, you can say I liked, or I felt, or I enjoyed, or I was confused. Okay, again, reinforce the positive, and if you have suggestions on ways that they can actually compensate or overcome some of the distracting things they're doing, offer them. If maybe in the past you've had the same struggle or the same problem, then share that with them. Okay? Here we have an example of even sometimes when you use the technique, the kiss, kick, kiss technique, it doesn't mean it's effective. I like your hat. Your face is ugly, but your top is nice. Somewhere in there we're missing some ethics. All right, and then provide the speaker with a plan of action. End with a positive statement. One of the highest compliments that you can give any speaker is that you actually learn something from their speech. So anytime you learn something new, always jot that down and let them know. For those of you receiving the feedback, okay, if you want to communicate more effectively, you have to get feedback, okay? Critiques are never going to be identical. Focus on what your critics say, not how they say it. Seek clear and immediate feedback, which is why we try to give feedback right after your speech. Evaluate feedback. Again, if only one person says something negative, I wouldn't worry about it. And then you yourself have to develop a plan of action so that the next time you give your speech, you can improve. Listening goes both ways. So as a speaker, you need to listen, and as an audience member, you need to listen. All right, so that brings us to the end of listening. I think I'm going to close out this video because we're almost at 15 minutes, which is my limit, and I'm going to do a separate video for Chapter 5. Don't forget to come back.